Hello, hello, hello. My name is Jack Taylor, and you've reached part 20 of Imagine Easter. Today we're talking about an anointing and an offering. 6 days before Easter comes, Jesus has gone to Bethany. He eats at the home of Lazarus, Martha, and Mary. Martha serves. The resurrected Lazarus reclines and eats. And Mary pours a pint of pure nard on Jesus' feet and wipes his feet with her hair. Well, Judas criticizes and Jesus commends. Mary and one other woman will make an impression on Jesus as he considers his own sacrifice coming soon. Every day he teaches at the temple, and every day he fends off the accusations and the murderous efforts of the religious elite to shut him up. What a relief to see someone who understands sacrifice. Instead of just reading the few verses assigned to the second woman, let me read you a creative rendition I wrote to bring it more to life. It was the perfect day for this adventure. The sun had already sucked the last dewdrop from the withered grass. The last chicken had offered up a small brown egg for breakfast. The twice-used tea leaves stained the lukewarm water just enough to give the illusion of something more. And rubbing the dried jasmine between her palms gave Hannah the joy of imagining Eden at its finest. There was no one to check on and no one who cared enough what she was up to. The two sets of rags draped off the pegs on the wall seemed to quiver in anticipation. One set was designated for the garden if the rain came again, the other for special adventures like this one. So she donned the latter and she reached for the small leather purse, her sole remaining treasure. Shading her eyes, the old woman reached for her walking stick. She stretched her back and she stepped into the furnace that hovered over the landscape. Her goal perched on an impossible summit. From her little hovel, there was nowhere to go but up. The light glinting off the temple blinded even her feeble eyes. The breakfast egg had been her sole sustenance over 3 days, and her shaky limbs demanded numerous rest stops along the way. Pilgrims, merchants, and curiosity seekers swarmed by her, giving her little notice. A little boy, dragged by his father up the hill, paused to cock his head and wave. And Hannah smiled and shared a small wave back. It had been years since her grandchildren had traveled from the north to see her. By the shadow shrinking into her feet, she reckoned it was noon. Vendors haggled with customers over prices as the hungry bargained for what they would consume. The leather purse in her hand burned for her attention. There were 2 coins, the smallest change, but the coins might buy bread. Didn't the children of the Almighty deserve something to sustain them in their worship? She sloughed off the gurgle in her belly and pressed on another dozen steps before resting. The hills around were barren. The hillside covered in gravestones across the narrow valley would soon be her final resting place. If only there was someone to mourn her passing. She shook off the unfamiliar shroud of self-pity and took another dozen steps. This was a fine city, and there was no finer temple in the land to honor her maker. A parade of religious zealots dressed in swishing black robes chanted in cadence as they swooped by, full of vigor and zeal for their task. It was impossible to miss this wake that they left behind as their piety settled like a cloud over the hilltop. The crush of the faithful in their wake almost knocked her off her feet, so she waited for a gap in the flow of humanity. The scent of the sacrifices pulled her back to the first visits in this place. What a joy it had been as a young girl to ride her father's shoulders into these sacred grounds, to scan the eager faces from nations all over the known world, to feel a part of something otherworldly, to purchase a lamb, to feel forgiven, to offer up an abundance from all that the Creator had provided. And now, years after the plague had taken her parents and brothers, years after her only sister had moved to the Galilee, years since she had seen anyone she could call family, she still took these steps. She watched the religious approach the offering boxes and with great fanfare deposit great sacks of wealth. She sheltered in the shade, fighting the shame of what she had. And while the faithful lauded the gifts of the robed one, she slipped up to the boxes and dropped her 2 cents. It was all she had. But she gave it with a sense of release and gratitude. Her life was now fully in the hands of the Almighty. She turned away toward the gate, and that's when she saw him. The young teacher surrounded by gawking disciples. The sparkle in his eyes matched the smile on his lips. His nod in her direction felt like the kiss of God on her heart. A strange shiver raced up and down her spine. She lowered her eyes and shuffled back to the entrance. She had made her deposit in heaven, and a strange hope filled her soul. For more stories like this, you can look at my website, thecrossmaker.ca. But in the meantime, I want you to join me tomorrow for one more step in our journey of imagining Easter together.